Hello everyone and a very warm welcome to another lesson. In this lesson, we are going to learn about IELTS Speaking Part 1. The topic of our lesson is hometown. We are going to be talking about your hometown. In this lesson, we are going to look at some questions and some sample answers. I'm also going to give you some tips to ensure that you pass your IELTS speaking test with a very high band. Now, before we begin the lesson, please do not forget to give this video a thumbs up and share the video with anybody else who may benefit from it. Thank you. Now, let's begin by looking at question 1. Tell me about the town where you live. Tell me about the town where you live. In this question, the examiner wants you to give him or her some information about where you live. Now, you can answer this question by saying, I live in a small city in southern Egypt called Luxor. I've been living there for the last 20 years. It's a beautiful historic city that is very popular with tourists from all over the world. I live in a small city in southern Egypt called Luxor. I've been living there for the last 20 years. It's a beautiful historic city that is very popular with tourists from all over the world. So in that question, I have given the examiner all the details that are important about where I live. First of all, I pointed out that the city is small. I live in a small city. And then I explained where the city is located. It is located in the south. Okay, in the south. In which country? In Egypt. And what is the name of the city? Luxor. After that, I have told the examiner how long I have been living there. I have used the phrase I've been living there. I've been living there for the last 20 years. And then I described what the city looks like very briefly. It's a beautiful historic city that is very popular with tourists from all over the world. So my answer is packed full of information about the town where I live. I live in a small city in southern Egypt called Luxor. I've been living there for the last 20 years. It's a beautiful historic city that is very popular with tourists from all over the world. Now let's move on to question 2. What's the most interesting part of that city? What's the most interesting part of that city? In this question, the examiner wants you to identify the best part of your city, what you find to be the most interesting, the most fascinating part of the city. Now you can answer this question by saying, the most interesting part of my hometown is definitely the magnificent Karnak temple, although quite frankly, the entire city is basically an open-air museum packed full with tourist attractions. The most interesting part of my hometown is definitely the magnificent Karnak temple, although quite frankly, the entire city is basically an open-air museum packed full with tourist attractions. So in that answer, I have identified what I think is the most interesting part of my hometown, and that is the magnificent Karnak Temple. And then I added the fact that I think although the Karnak Temple is the most interesting part of my hometown, quite frankly, the entire city, the whole of Luxor, is basically an open-air museum packed full with tourist attractions. So in that answer, you notice that I have given all the details about the most interesting part of the city, and I have also used some linking words, okay? And you notice that that answer is a complex sentence. So ensure that when the examiner asks you the question, you provide some extra details, okay? Do not simply say, the most interesting part of my hometown is Karnak Temple. Now that is fine, okay? If you're not very confident, you can leave it at that. If you don't want to make any mistakes, you can simply say, the most interesting part of my hometown is Karnak Temple, and you just leave it at that. But if you want to get a band 9, which I'm aiming for in these sample answers, then I'm going to provide more details and make sure that I use complex sentences and linking words. Now, let's move on to question 3. What kind of jobs do people do there? What kind of jobs do people do there? So in this question, the examiner wants to know what kind of jobs people do in the city where you live. Now, you can answer this question by saying, majority of the people in my hometown work in the tourism industry as tour guides, interpreters, housekeepers, hotel managers, tour operators, and chefs. Others work as market hawkers selling curios to tourists. Majority of the people in my hometown work in the tourism industry as tour guides, interpreters, housekeepers, hotel managers, tour operators, and chefs. Others work as market hawkers selling curios to tourists. So in that question, I have explained what kind of jobs people do in my hometown. What sort of work do they do? So I said majority. Majority means most of them, okay? Most of the people, majority of the people, okay? They work in the tourism industry as tour guides, interpreters, housekeepers, hotel managers, tour operators, and chefs. And then others work as market hawkers, selling curios to tourists. Now, curios are the sort of items that tourists tend to buy when they go on holiday somewhere. And some examples of curios would be beads, necklaces, sandals, clothes, but most of the time curios refers to things to do with necklaces, beads, that sort of thing. Carvings, for example, wooden carvings, okay, that sort of thing. Now, let's move on to question 4. Do you like your hometown? If so, what do you like the most? Okay, now, this is a different question. The second question was, what's the most interesting part? This one is asking, what do you like the most? So those two questions are quite different. Now, do you like your hometown? So is it yes or is it no? What do you like the most? Now, you can answer that question by saying, I like my hometown very much, especially the market, because it is very vibrant and lively with people selling all sorts of goods. For example, food products fresh from the farms, household items, and touristic artifacts. I like my hometown very much, especially the market, because it is very vibrant and lively with people selling all sorts of goods, for example, food products, fresh from the farms, household items, and touristic artifacts. So in that answer, I have pointed out that I like my hometown very much. And then I explained what I like the most about it. So I like my hometown very much, especially the market. So the market is what I like the most. And then I gave the reason. I introduced the reason using the linking word because it is very vibrant. Vibrant means that it is full of life. You know, in the marketplace, you have people selling, people buying, people eating. It's very vibrant. It's full of life, with people selling all sorts of goods, for example, food products fresh from the farms, like mangoes, potatoes, fruits, vegetables. They also sell household items, like, for example, if you're looking for cooking pans, plates, if you want to buy any sorts of household items, spoons, forks, you will find them in the market. But they also sell touristic artifacts, for example, beads, necklaces, wooden carvings, for example, that sort of thing. Now, question 5. Is there anything you dislike about your hometown? Is there anything you dislike about your hometown? So in this question, the examiner wants you to point out if there is something you don't like. Is there something you do not like about your hometown? Now you can answer this question by saying, the one thing that I really detest about my hometown is the street vendors who keep harassing tourists to buy their goods. I find it so rude. The one thing that I really detest about my hometown is the street vendors who keep harassing tourists to buy their goods. I find it so rude. So in that question, I pointed out that the one thing that I do not like about my hometown is the street vendors. Street vendors are people who sell things on the streets. And the reason I don't like them is because they keep harassing tourists, okay? They keep calling tourists to buy their goods. They keep harassing them. They follow them, they follow them and they nag them. I find it so rude. So the one thing that I really detest, to detest is to hate something. Okay, if you detest something, you hate it so much. The one thing that I really detest, the one thing that I really hate, okay, the one thing that I really detest about my hometown is the street vendors who keep harassing tourists to buy their goods. I find it so rude. So I also gave a reason as to why I don't like it. Now, number 6. Do you think you will continue living there for a long time? Do you think you will continue living there for a long time? Now, you can answer that question by saying, not really. As soon as I pass my IELTS exams, I plan on migrating to Cairo, which is the capital city, to work for an international oil company. Not really. As soon as I pass my IELTS exams, I plan on migrating to Cairo, which is the capital city, to work for an international oil company. So, in that answer, I have explained to the examiner that I don't think I will continue living there for a long time. I introduced my answer using the words not really. Okay, do you think you will continue living there for a long time? Not really. As soon as I pass my IELTS exams, I plan on migrating to Cairo, which is the capital city, to work for an international oil company. Now let's move on to number 7. Has your hometown changed much since you were a child? Has your hometown changed much since you were a child? So the examiner wants to know, are there any changes in your hometown since when you were a child? Has the town changed? Now you can answer that question by saying, yes, the city has become more overpopulated, which has led to a shortage in jobs, especially in the tourism sector. On the other hand, it is more developed with better infrastructure, for example, roads, water supply, and electricity. Yes, the city has become more overpopulated, which has led to a shortage in jobs, especially in the tourism sector. On the other hand, it is more developed with better infrastructure, for example, roads, water supply, and electricity. Now, in that answer, I have explained what has changed in my hometown. The first thing that has changed is that now it is more overpopulated. That means there are a lot more people, okay? There are more people who are living there than it was when I was a child. So the city has become more overpopulated, and that has led to a shortage in jobs, especially in the tourism sector. On the other hand, it is more developed with better infrastructure, for example, roads, water supply, and electricity. So I have started with a positive change, or rather a negative change. That is, it is more overpopulated. So because of that, there is a shortage of jobs. There are not many jobs anymore, especially in the tourism sector. And then I use the linking word on the other hand to introduce a positive change, and that is, it is now more developed with better infrastructure. For example, roads, water supply, and electricity. Now, number 8. Any changes you would like to see in your hometown? Now, that question can be asked like that, or the examiner can say, are there any changes you would like to see in your hometown? Are there any changes you would like to see in your hometown? Now, you can answer that question by saying, I would really like to see cleaner streets, so I think the local city council should hire more cleaners and garbage collectors. I would really like to see cleaner streets, so I think the local city council should hire more cleaners and garbage collectors. So I answered that question. I made it clear to the examiner, yes, that I would like to see some changes, and the changes I would like to see are in regards to cleaner streets. I would really like to see cleaner streets. The streets right now are dirty. So I would really like to see cleaner streets. So I think the local city council should hire. To hire is to employ more cleaners. Cleaners are people who clean. And garbage collectors. Garbage collectors are people who collect garbage on the streets. Okay, like plastic containers, bottles, when people throw things on the street, garbage collectors pick them up. So that's how you're supposed to answer these questions. Those are some sample answers. These are burnt 9 sample answers. And now I'm going to give you just a few tips to help you out when it comes to your IELTS speaking test. Now, if you are nervous, if you are the sort of person who gets really nervous when you have to do a speaking test, the first tip that I'm going to give you is repeat the question. When the examiner asks you the question, you can repeat part of the question in your answer. For example, when the examiner says, tell me about the town where you live. Tell me about the town where you live. You can say, I live in, or the town where I live, okay? I live in, so you are repeating part of the question in your answer. What's the most interesting part of that city? The most interesting part of my hometown is that. What kind of jobs do people do there? The kind of jobs people do in my hometown are. So repeat part of the question in your answer. That gives you time to think about what you're going to say. The other tip I'm going to give you, if you're the kind of person who gets really, really scared and nervous when you have to talk, is you can repeat the whole question before you give the answer. For example, when the examiner says, "Tell me about the town where you live," you can say this. The town where I live. Okay, the town where I live is actually a small city in southern Egypt called Luxor. Okay, so you repeat the question before you give the answer. When the examiner says, "What's the most interesting part of that city?" The most interesting part. Okay, let's see. The most interesting part. You see, you're thinking about the answer, and then you say, "Oh, actually, the most interesting part of the city where I live is that." Okay, so when you repeat the whole question, it gives you a chance to think of the answer, and it's allowed. You're not going to lose any marks or get a lower band because of that. Like, for example, again, in question 3, when the examiner says, "What kind of jobs do people do there?" You can say, the kind of jobs people, what kind of jobs? The kind of jobs people do. Okay, that then you give the jobs. All right, so that gives you a chance to think of your answers, and when you do that, then you become less nervous. Okay, I give you another example. Number 5, is there anything you dislike about your hometown? What do I dislike about my hometown? Let's see. Oh, the one thing that I really detest about my hometown is the street vendors who keep harassing tourists to buy their goods. I find it so rude. Okay, so that's a tip. Those 2 tips are really going to help you if you're the sort of person who gets really nervous and you forget everything. Now, the other tips I'm going to give you is that try, once the examiner asks you the question, listen to the key part of the question. In each of these 8 questions, I've underlined the key parts. Tell me about the town where you live. The key word is town. So once you hear the word town, you start thinking about what you're going to say. What's the most interesting part? The examiner wants to hear the most interesting part. Keyword is most interesting part. Number 3 is jobs. Number 4 is what is, like the most. Number 5, what you dislike. Number 6, whether you're going to continue living there. Number 7, whether the town has changed. Number 8, any changes. So listen to the keywords in each question. Tip number 2 that I'm going to give you, in your answers, try to be detailed, especially if you're aiming for band 8 or a band 9. Next tip, try and use linking words to join your ideas together. You can see in my answers, I have used a number of linking words. For example, in sample answer 2, I have used although, okay? The most interesting part of my hometown is definitely the magnificent Karnak temple, although, okay? And throughout my sample answers, I have used several linking words. Now, it's not a must to use linking words. If you're not confident, it is better not to use them, because when you use them incorrectly, then you get a lower band. The next tip that I'm going to give you is that make sure you have good vocabulary that is related to the question, the topic. Here we're talking about hometown, so you need some vocabulary to know how to talk about hometown. I have a whole video about vocabulary that is related to hometown. Have a look at that. My playlist on vocabulary, IELTS Speaking vocabulary, and you will find that video there. I have also made another video before about hometown, so you can watch that video as well. And finally, just smile, okay? Relax and smile. Convince yourself that your English is perfect and that you're not going to make any mistakes. And if you do, it's not the end of the world. And just smile and enjoy yourself, okay? When you enjoy yourself, that comes across as confidence. So that is very attractive to the examiner. So just smile and remember the first 2 tips that I gave you. If you're very nervous, always begin your answer with the question. Okay? Now, if you found this video helpful at all, please give the video a thumbs up. Share this video with somebody else so that somebody else can also learn from the video. And also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn your notification bell on, because I'm going to be uploading the third segment. This is the second segment of how to introduce yourself to the examiner. So I'm going to be uploading the third and the fourth segment of this series. Now, thank you very much for watching and listening, and I wish you all the best if you're preparing for your IELTS. Remember, you can do it, okay? All you have to do is practice, because practice makes perfect. Now, thank you very much, everyone, and I shall see you in our next video. Bye-bye, and take good care of yourself.